Welcome to Error 404 Decoded, where we decode the most fascinating bugs in the human system. Today we're analyzing a very specific bug. Why does your body execute an emergency protocol before your conscious brain even processes that danger exists? If you've ever felt chills out of nowhere, or jumped scared at something you didn't even see properly, you've experienced this bug firsthand. Picture this situation. You're walking on a trail when you suddenly scream and jump back. Only afterwards, do you realize there was a snake on the ground? What's interesting is that your system had already detected the threat, executed an emergency response, and made you react, all before your conscious mind formed the thought, there's a snake there. It's like having two programs running in parallel on the same hardware. To understand this phenomenon, we need to debug the human nervous system. What happens is that you basically have two processing units working simultaneously. The conscious system, which is slower but analytical, and the primitive system, which is ultra-fast but basic. When your visual sensors capture certain patterns, serpentine movement, specific colors, particular textures, this information is sent to both processors through different routes. The primitive processor, located in an area called the amygdala, receives the data first. It doesn't waste time analyzing details. It simply compares the input with a library of ancestral threats that's been hard-coded into the system for millions of years. Snakes are at the top of this priority list, so when the pattern matches, the system immediately executes the emergency protocol. And if you're finding this interesting, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we still have plenty of human bugs to decode around here. This emergency protocol is fascinating. Within milliseconds, your system releases a cascade of chemicals into the bloodstream, adrenaline, noradrenaline, that completely alter your body's operational state. Your heart rate spikes, breathing accelerates, and something very specific happens. Small muscles at the base of hair follicles contract, making the hairs stand up. This generates that classic sensation of chills or goosebumps. Evolutionarily, this feature made sense. When the hairs stood up, our ancestors appeared, larger and more intimidating to predators. Plus, it created extra thermal insulation. Picture a caveman encountering a lion. When his hair stood up, he looked visibly larger. The extra volume could make the predator think twice before attacking, and it still created an air layer that helped maintain body heat. It was a real survival advantage. Nowadays, it's basically a legacy feature. That is, old code that's still active in the system even though it's no longer necessary. When you see a snake and your hair stands up, you're not more intimidating. You don't need the extra thermal insulation. It serves no practical purpose in the current situation. But your body still executes this function automatically because it's been hard-coded into your system for millions of years. It's like those old programs that still run on your computer even though you never use them. They're there, functioning, but completely unnecessary for your current needs. The timing of this operation is impressive. Studies show that the primitive processor can identify and respond to threats in approximately 100 milliseconds, while conscious processing takes between 300 to 500 milliseconds. Those 200 to 400 milliseconds of advantage can be the difference between escaping a dangerous situation or not. It's literally the difference between life and death coded into your operating system. But here's where it gets interesting. This detection system doesn't only work with obvious threats like snakes. It's constantly running in the background, monitoring all sensory inputs looking for anomalies. It could be someone's slightly strange behavior, subtle changes in the environment, odors, that the conscious system doesn't even register, sounds outside the normal pattern. When something doesn't match expected parameters, the alert protocol is activated. That's why you sometimes enter a place and feel that something's not right without being able to explain what. Your primitive system has already processed hundreds of microsignals and concluded that the situation presents potential risk, so it executes those characteristic chills as a warning. It's like having an emotional antivirus always scanning the environment. Let's take a practical example. You're walking alone on the street at night and suddenly feel chills, even without seeing anything specific. It could be that your sensors picked up footsteps with a different rhythm behind you, or a shadow that moved inconsistently, or even the smell of someone who shouldn't be there. Your primitive processor gathered all these fragmented pieces of information and reached the conclusion: suspicious situation detected. Result: instant chills. And since we're talking about alert systems, how about activating the notification bell here on the channel? That way you won't miss any new content about the most fascinating bugs in human programming. Interestingly, this same system can be triggered in completely safe contexts. For example, when you're at the top of a roller coaster about to drop, the primitive processor interprets the imminent fall as a threat and activates the same protocol, generating chills even though you rationally know you're safe. It's the ancestral system working exactly as it was programmed, unable to distinguish between real and simulated danger. The system also presents interesting variations between different users. People who grew up exposed to certain types of threats may have more calibrated and faster responses. On the other hand, repeated exposure to certain situations can desensitize the system, decreasing response intensity over time as it learns that certain contexts don't represent real risk. Here comes another fascinating aspect. The system isn't limited to just physical threats. It can also detect social threats. Have you ever noticed how sometimes you feel inexplicable discomfort around certain people, even when they haven't done anything specific? Your primitive processor is analyzing facial microexpressions, tone of voice, body posture, and comparing them with patterns of potentially dangerous behavior. When something doesn't add up, you feel those characteristic chills. This happens because, evolutionarily, social threats were as dangerous as physical threats. Being expelled from the group meant certain death for our ancestors. So we developed ultra-refined social sensors that are still operational today, even in completely different contexts. Another interesting bug is how this system can be hacked by stimuli that don't represent real danger. Music is a perfect example. Have you ever gotten chills listening to particularly moving music? What happens is that certain combinations of sound frequencies, rhythms, and harmonic progressions manage to activate the same neural circuits as the threat detection system, generating the physical response of chills, only associated with pleasure instead of fear. It's as if music could exploit a vulnerability in your emotional code. Experienced composers intuitively know how to create these sonic traps that make you feel chills at specific moments in the music. It's a form of auditory social engineering, if you think about it. The system can also be influenced by external factors you don't even notice. Changes in barometric pressure before storms, infrasound produced by natural events, even electromagnetic fields can trigger primitive system responses. That's why some people report feeling restless or having chills before earthquakes or severe storms. The system is detecting environmental changes that the conscious processor can't identify. This unconscious processing capacity extends beyond danger detection. Studies show that we can process complex emotional information about people in milliseconds just by looking at them. Your primitive system is constantly performing risk analyses on everyone around you, classifying them into categories like trustworthy, suspicious, potential threat, all before you even form a conscious opinion about the person. What's interesting is that this system can conflict with your conscious processor. You might rationally know that a situation is safe, but still feel chills and discomfort. This creates that strange sensation of, my head says one thing, but my body is saying another. In these cases, it's literally a conflict between different operating systems running on the same hardware. But here's a valuable tip. When your primitive system triggers these alerts, it's worth paying attention. It might be picking up signals that your conscious mind is missing. Obviously, not every chill indicates real danger, but it's a sign that something in the environment has changed and deserves your attention. What makes this bug particularly fascinating is that it reveals how we're basically modern hardware running very old software. We carry alert systems developed for environments where predators were a constant threat, but which remain operational even in urban contexts where the dangers are completely different. It's like using a smartphone to run a program written in the 70s. It works, but sometimes generates strange behaviors because the software wasn't designed for current hardware. Your chills are literally ancestral code being executed on modern hardware. So next time you feel chills out of nowhere, remember, it's not paranoia, it's your survival system working exactly as it was programmed. An ultra-fast and ultra-efficient threat scanner that keeps running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even after millions of years since it was written. So, have you experienced this bug? Tell us in the comments what was the strangest situation where you felt chills without conscious explanation. Like the video if you enjoyed this decoding. Subscribe to the channel for more analyses of the most interesting bugs in the human system. And see you in the next debug.